The Great Irish Depression of 1929 to 1939, a decade marked by severe economic hardship, reshaped the landscape of Ireland's social and political realities. Like the broader global downturn, it left a deep imprint on the nation's economy and people. As the effects of the Great Depression spread throughout the world, Ireland faced its own set of unique challenges. The global slump was felt acutely due to Ireland's reliance on agriculture, particularly its dependence on exports of agricultural products such as cattle, which were heavily affected by the collapse in international demand. Ireland's small and underdeveloped industrial base was ill-prepared to cope with such a severe downturn. By the early 1930s, a combination of shrinking international markets, plummeting commodity prices, and the high cost of living began to create widespread unemployment, financial strain, and economic stagnation. Economic hardships had a profound impact on Irish society. By 1932, over 1/4 of Ireland's workforce was unemployed, and those who still had jobs saw significant wage cuts. Many families struggled to make ends meet, and poverty spread across the country. Rural communities were hit particularly hard, as the agricultural sector faltered, leaving many small farmers with little to sustain them. Urban areas were not immune either, as the industrial sector struggled to maintain its footing amidst the global economic downturn. Despite some efforts by the Irish government to address the crisis, Ireland found itself in an economic stalemate, with poverty and unemployment affecting virtually every segment of society. The effects were not just material, but psychological, as widespread economic insecurity made the country's future seem uncertain. In response to the devastating economic crisis, the Irish government under de Valera began to adopt policies of economic isolationism and protectionism. Seeking to shield Ireland from the worst impacts of the global downturn, de Valera's government turned its focus inward, prioritizing the development of domestic industries and curbing foreign trade. This shift in policy, known as economic self-sufficiency, aimed to reduce reliance on imports, particularly from Britain, and to encourage domestic production. It was hoped that by reducing the outflow of money to foreign markets, Ireland could stabilize its economy and create jobs for its citizens. The government imposed tariffs and restrictions on foreign goods, especially agricultural imports, in an effort to protect local producers. These protectionist measures, while intended to shield the Irish economy from external shocks, had mixed results. While some sectors, like the dairy industry, experienced short-term benefits, the overall impact was less successful in achieving long-term economic recovery. Ireland's efforts at self-sufficiency also had profound social and political implications. By distancing itself economically from Britain, Ireland sought to assert its political independence, an important consideration in the wake of the Irish War of Independence and the establishment of the Irish Free State. The policy of economic isolation was as much about national pride as it was about survival in a hostile economic environment. However, the isolationist approach led to tensions within the government and society, as some critics argued that such policies would stifle economic growth and lead to further international isolation. The struggle to balance self-sufficiency with the need for economic development would define much of Ireland's economic policy for years to come. Rural Ireland, home to the majority of the country's population, was particularly hard hit during the Great Depression. The agricultural sector, which was the backbone of the Irish economy, faced crippling declines in income due to falling international prices for agricultural products. Farmers who had once been able to rely on steady income from exports now found themselves facing a dramatic reduction in demand for their goods. The failure of international markets, compounded by the decline in agricultural productivity, led to widespread financial distress in rural communities. For many farmers, the inability to sell produce at a profit meant they struggled to cover basic living expenses. This economic collapse exacerbated long-standing issues within rural Ireland, such as land fragmentation and a lack of modern farming techniques. The difficulties faced by farmers were compounded by a system of land tenure, that left many Irish people bound to small plots of land. Land reform had been a contentious issue for decades, and the inability to efficiently utilize land during the Depression period exposed the flaws in the agricultural system. Many farmers were trapped in cycles of debt, with no clear path to economic stability. The rural poor also suffered from inadequate access to education and healthcare, further intensifying the sense of isolation and hopelessness in these communities. As the agricultural sector struggled, many young people began to leave rural areas in search of work, fueling the ongoing trend of emigration. Rural Ireland's economic plight, in conjunction with political and social discontent, laid the foundation for significant changes in both the Irish economy and its political landscape in the years to come. While rural areas suffered most visibly during the Great Depression, Ireland's urban centres were not exempt from the economic difficulties of the time. The industrial sector, though small compared to agriculture, had been slowly expanding during the early years of the 20th century. However, when the Depression hit, industrial workers faced severe job losses and wage cuts, further contributing to the country's rising unemployment rate. Cities like Dublin, Cork, and Belfast saw significant increases in poverty, as many workers in manufacturing and other industries found themselves out of work. The economic downturn exacerbated existing social issues, such as overcrowded housing, high rates of infant mortality, and poor living conditions in slum areas. Many urban families struggled to make ends meet, leading to a rise in homelessness and social unrest. The Irish government's protectionist policies, while aimed at supporting the local economy, failed to adequately address the specific challenges faced by urban centres. In some cases, the tariffs imposed on imports and the push for domestic production hindered the ability of Irish cities to recover. The failure to diversify the Irish economy and reduce its dependence on agriculture left the country vulnerable to external economic shocks, which continued to affect both rural and urban populations. The hardships of urban life during the Depression were compounded by the fact that many people in cities had little recourse for social welfare or government assistance. The urban poor were left to fend for themselves, leading to an increasing sense of frustration and a growing divide between the haves and have-nots in Irish society. The Great Depression had significant political ramifications in Ireland, as the economic hardships of the time prompted widespread discontent with the ruling government. The electorate, struggling to cope with the fallout from the economic crisis, began to lose faith in the ability of the government to effectively manage the economy. This dissatisfaction contributed to the rise of political movements advocating for greater state intervention and reforms. In particular, the 1932 general election saw the Fianna Fáil party, led by de Valera, gain power. De Valera's party campaigned on promises of economic relief and a break from the policies of the previous government. Once in power, de Valera's administration sought to address the economic crisis by implementing a variety of protectionist measures, such as tariffs and subsidies for domestic industries. These policies were designed to promote self-sufficiency and reduce Ireland's reliance on British imports. De Valera's political strategies reflected a broader shift towards economic nationalism and away from Britain, which had long been Ireland's primary trading partner. However, the Fianna Fáil government's approach to managing the Depression was not universally popular. Critics argued that the protectionist measures were too limiting and that they would hinder Ireland's recovery by isolating it from the global economy. Nevertheless, de Valera's government remained focused on establishing Ireland's economic independence, even at the cost of potentially worsening the Depression's effects. The political ramifications of the Great Depression were also felt in Northern Ireland, where tensions between Catholic nationalists and Protestant Unionists deepened, partly as a result of the economic hardships faced by both communities. The legacy of the Great Irish Depression continued to influence Irish politics and economics for decades. Though the immediate effects of the Depression began to ease by the late 1930s, The policies and ideological shifts initiated during this period had lasting consequences. De Valera's vision of an economically self-sufficient Ireland shaped the country's economic policies for much of the 20th century, even as Ireland sought to integrate more fully into the global economy after World War II. The emphasis on protectionism, while aimed at safeguarding Irish industries, limited the country's ability to diversify and modernize its economy, which hindered growth for many years. Additionally, the economic isolation of the Depression years contributed to a broader sense of political and cultural nationalism that defined Irish identity well into the latter half of the century. The economic hardships of the Depression also had social consequences, fostering a sense of solidarity among the Irish people, especially in rural communities, that persisted into the post-war era. However, the strain placed on families and communities during this period had lasting effects on Ireland's social fabric. The memory of the Great Depression remained a powerful symbol of struggle, perseverance, and the need for reform in Irish society. As Ireland gradually recovered from the Depression, the lessons learned during this tumultuous period shaped the policies and priorities of future generations of Irish leaders, ensuring that the Great Irish Depression remained a defining chapter in the nation's history.